If you look at cars from the 1980s and compare them to cars from the 1990s, you'll notice one massive difference in their design language. The earlier ones are strictly angular, while the ones from the 90s are completely rounded. For some specific models, we can even point to the exact year they transitioned from rigid squares into sleek soap bars. Take a look at the BMW E34 series, and then the E39 model that replaced it. See those curves? Let's look at the Japanese school of design with a global favorite, the 1980 Toyota Camry, compared to the generation from the 90s. And finally, let's check out the biggest fans of square shapes, the American School of Automotive Engineering. Take a look at this commercial for the refreshed Buick LeSabre.
Once again, Buick is raising the banner for quality in America. Introducing the 1992 LeSabre.
Notice how the 1991 model is blocky with razor-sharp edges, but the 1992 model is incredibly smooth and rounded. From that point on, cars just kept getting rounder and rounder. Just think about what the roads look like in the 2000s and 2010s. So, how did this happen? When manufacturers started pumping out rounded cars in the 1990s, it wasn't actually a brand new concept. Way back in the 1930s, streamlined cars like the Chrysler Airflow used this elegant design to slash wind resistance. However, when the 1950s and 60s rolled around, American streamlined cars stopped selling well. They were pushed out of the market by larger, much boxier vehicles. Gas prices were steadily dropping back then, so nobody gave a second thought to improving aerodynamics just to save fuel. Up until the 1970s, almost every car produced in America had sharp edges and very few curves. Essentially, they were designed using the three-box concept: a box for the hood, a box for the cabin, and a box for the trunk. While that logic worked perfectly for the American market, gas in Europe was always much more expensive. In the 1960s, a gallon of gas in France cost about 73 cents, while in the US, it was only 31 cents. Because of this, European designers were the first to aggressively experiment with aerodynamic shapes to help cars glide through the air easier and consequently burn less fuel. Sure, Americans had dabbled in sweeping, rounded bodies before, but that was mostly inspired by the space race and the trend of futuristic design, shapes you'd usually only see on wild concept cars. On the mass market, the story was very different. In Europe, a designer named Uwe Bansen was the first to truly push rounded design to the everyday driver, and he did it with the 1982 Ford Sierra. It was significantly rounder than any other car in its segment at the time. Critics absolutely laughed at it. Just imagine, this is what they considered round back then, and they had no idea what the first generation Ford Focus would eventually look like. At first it didn't sell very well, and was mockingly nicknamed the Jelly Mold, but one of the designers from that European Ford team, Jack Telnack, took over the American design studio in 1980. At that moment, American gas prices were skyrocketing due to conflicts in the Middle East. Telnack introduced mandatory wind tunnel testing to the American design process. He first applied this to the 1983 Ford Thunderbird, but the true breakthrough came a few years later. The result was the revolutionary 1986 Ford Taurus. Today, it might not look like anything special, but back then, this style was groundbreaking. It was a mass market car with completely smoothed out edges, and people loved it. It was even featured as the car of the future in the movie RoboCop. Sales of the Taurus practically saved Ford, which was going through serious financial trouble at the time. This massive success inspired a whole wave of copycats building rounded vehicles. Improving aerodynamics became even more critical because manufacturers were facing strict new fuel economy regulations in the US. Starting in 1978, the corporate average fuel economy for every manufacturer's passenger fleet had to meet increasingly high targets. According to one Ford designer, focusing on an aerodynamic design was a much cheaper way to increase fuel efficiency than doing expensive engineering overhauls under the hood. On top of that, the rise of computer-aided design, CAD, in the 1980s made it much easier for automakers to model and manufacture those smooth, curved body lines. All these years later, the impact on modern cars is crystal clear. Even the vehicles we criticize today for being boxy, like the latest generation of the Mercedes-Benz G-Wagen, are actually quite rounded when you look closely at the details. However, judging by BMW's new design language for their upcoming models, called the Neue Klasse, things might be about to change once again in the near future.